Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a company known for their data backups gets shut down after their AWS account is compromised. Then we'll tell you about the hedge fund that's under attack and getting a lot of information out of a little bit of data. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 168 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on June 26th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and iXsystems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. How's it going over there? You roasty toasty?
It's not too bad.
Yeah, it's because you got the AC. Let's be honest. Come on, I know you. Well, today's fun because we're doing this early. We're kicking off a double TechSNAP recording, and because Alan's going to be traveling in a couple of weeks, so we wanted to make sure we didn't miss an episode. Can't break the TechSNAP streak, so we are doing 2 episodes this week, and sometimes when that happens, like, we over-prepare, and we end up with
almost
huge
always.
shows. Yeah.
I think every single time. Every single time.
Yeah, this episode's no exception. We got a great show today. Our first one is almost like it's like a war story for somebody whose entire business was dependent on the Amazon Web Services. What's happening here, Alan? Because I tell you from the headline, it looks quite bad.
Yeah, so there was a company who used Amazon Web Services and to host all their stuff, and their Amazon account was compromised, and all of their data was deleted.
Oh.
Yeah. So the company was called CodeSpaces, which was a source code hosting and backup service. So they hosted Subversion repositories for people and backed stuff up. And they've since shut down because of the thing. So what happened was back on June 17th, the company came under a distributed denial of service attack, which, has happened to them before, and they were pretty much prepared for that. But a little bit later on, when they logged into their Amazon portal, they found a message waiting for them, urging them to contact this Hotmail address.
What?
So they did. And it was a message from the attacker demanding a very large ransom.
Oh.
We're not going to stop this denial of service attack until you pay us or whatever.
Yeah.
But obviously the attacker had also infiltrated their Amazon control panel. So when CodeSpaces then attempted to change their passwords for the Amazon control panel, since it obviously had been compromised, what the attacker had done was set up additional administrator accounts, right? So when he had access, instead of, just leaving the message, he created a bunch of extra accounts that he knew the passwords for. And so when they started trying to reset the passwords, he found out what was going on. I'm not sure if that's a setting where you can have all the administrators get emailed when somebody resets a password or something.
Probably, yeah.
Anyway, he became aware that they were trying to lock him out of the control panel by changing the passwords. So he used one of the accounts they hadn't got around to disabling yet and deleted every EC2 instance virtual machine. So all the servers that were actually running their code, he deleted those, stopped them and deleted them. So right away their service is down, but the EC2s usually don't actually contain the data. Right, because in EC2, when you shut it down, the data gets erased. So you don't actually store customer data and like your database there. You store it in S3 or EBS or whatever.
Right.
But then they deleted all the S3 stores and all the Elastic Block Store volumes. So all the data in the account, basically.
That's spiteful almost.
Yeah, and did all that before they could revoke all the access.
And when you say that, is that because this guy was really fast and moved really quick, or is it because the company was really slow?
A little bit. It's not clear. All we really have is their statement.
Okay.
So it's not clear, but I'm guessing it's a little bit of both. But mostly that, yes, the attacker was expecting them to do this and was waiting for it. And
almost like a hostage situation where, like, here's the terms, and if you don't follow my terms, one of the hostages is gonna get it. In this case,
in this case, it was, all right, the SWAT team is trying to breach the building. We're going to teach you a lesson by just hosing all the hostages.
Yeah. Anybody has any particular group claimed credit for this?
No, although CodeSpaces obviously has a Hotmail address and stuff, but I don't know that anybody's taking credit for it. I don't know that they would. If you're in it to make money, not to get fame, then you don't want anybody. The easiest way to get caught as a hacker is to brag about stuff. So you don't. If you actually are in it to ransom money out of people instead.
I guess what I was thinking is like it almost seems like they were trying to set an example. Like, if you screw with us, we'll get you. And so then next time they go to somebody, they could be like, look, we're the guys that deleted all of their stuff when they didn't play ball.
Here's a list of businesses we've destroyed. You better pay our ransom.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what happened to these folks, right?
Yeah. I'll read their statement in a minute. But the most embarrassing part of the whole situation is some text that was on the CodeSpaces website originally before it was shut down.
Yeah.
It says, backing up data is one thing, but it is meaningless without a recovery plan. Not only that, but also sorry, their quote is hard to read. Anyway, I said, and one of that is well practiced and proven to work time and time again. So they need a recovery plan. CodeSpaces has a full recovery plan and has proven to work and is in fact practiced. So
they were bragging about a recovery plan that they apparently did.
Yes, that they had this backup and recovery plan, and they would be able to, if data lost, they would be able to recover it and so on. But apparently not so much.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, it's kind of ironic that they even talk about like, it's great to have backups, but it's meaningless if you don't have a recovery plan. And then here we are.
And you have to practice a recovery plan, right? We've said that on this show a bunch of times. And they're on their website, it's a recovery plan, one that's well practiced and proven to work time and time again. And they're like, yes, we have a full recovery plan and we practice it. Seems it wasn't as well thought out as they thought. It's like
was there
it's not really clear what their backups were.
Was it like image backup snapshots of their Amazon instances and once those got deleted?
Like even then, it's like I don't know how many they were keeping or whatever, but it just seems like they didn't actually have a completely separate backup as opposed to just snapshots or something.
Yeah.
But again, we don't have all the details. But
well, it's like you were talking about in the pre-show. It's one of those things where if we presume that they were storing their backups on Amazon's infrastructure, then the backups were almost meaningless because they weren't stored in an alternative location on a different service somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, it's not clear what their backup strategy was, but it does seem that it involved their main Amazon account. In general, the idea with an off-site backup is to separate it from the failure of the primary. Right? If you keep the backups of your database beside the database server and your office burns down, then those backups did you a lot of good, didn't they?
You could see how someone almost considers like S3 this, it is offsite, even though you could see how someone could maybe fall into that trap.
Primary as well.
Right.
Like it's happened before that Amazon has lost data that was in S3.
Yeah.
They've managed to recover most of it sometimes, but
right, we talked about it on the show once before.
It has happened, and you have to assume that it's going to happen again. And so just having 2 copies of it in S3 is not a backup.
No.
What if Amazon suffers a catastrophic data loss, or what if your account is compromised?
That's the biggest risk. That's the most real risk, obviously.
Even if you're like intimately tied to the Amazon infrastructure, maybe your backups should be in a separate Amazon account. That's much more strictly controlled. Like your main Amazon account, like all the ops guys need to be able to use it or whatever.
That's an interesting idea.
Backup account, at least separate on a separate credit card, so that if it comes down to something like your credit card doesn't work anymore or something, Amazon deletes all your data because you didn't pay them.
Right.
If it's a separate account on a separate credit card, that same thing can happen again. And,
I guess if you have to do it, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, or you really should consider using some other service just in case Amazon does something. Well, yes. Although TarSNAP runs on Amazon S3.
Oh, shoot.
But it's a separate account.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
So the chance of Amazon losing both, it would require Amazon to,
yeah, that'd be
to be completely
at that level. At that level, you've got a pretty good excuse because a lot of people are affected.
But still, you should have backups that aren't in the same place as your main.
Yeah. And look there's lots of ways to do it. All right.
And it's still not clear how their Amazon account got compromised in the first place. Was it phishing like we've seen with other places or what? But it also seems more than likely that CodeSpaces was not making use of Amazon's multi-factor authentication service. Right? They offer either you can use something like Google Authenticator or their own Authenticator app for Android. It works on iOS and even Windows phones. Or you can get hardware ones. They have a key fob type one, like one that goes on your keychain, or a credit card size one.
That's a great suggestion.
And it seems that they were not using that. And without that, the attacker managed to get the username and password and log in. Whereas if they had had hardware authenticators, that wouldn't have happened. Although it's not clear with Amazon how that works when you have a lot of people that need access, but I'm pretty sure that it does, right? You create separate accounts and they have separate authenticators. Because in general, it's a bad idea to share accounts for anything as well.
Right. Absolutely. This is pretty particular. Yeah. I think this is a particular type of problem that, you know, we're taking some shots at code spaces, but I think it's going to affect.
Right, and I don't mean to you know, be like, oh, look at these guys.
Right. The problem is it's probably representative of a lot of applications that are sort of propped up very quickly these days. Maybe the people creating the infrastructure are not totally familiar with this. Alan and I have gotten some heat for our stance on the whole DevOps trend. And I don't mean to harp on that because I know DevOps can mean a lot of things, and in its purest form, the collaboration is good. The meaning.
Just,
but this could be an example.
Is the developer is also the operations guy.
Do you think maybe that's what you were seeing here? Because this does.
I'm not sure. It definitely seems like, you know, they had this recovery plan that assumed that the data loss was caused by, I don't know,
customer mistake maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, and things, or you know, something like that, where they didn't really consider someone maliciously deleting stuff as one of the scenarios that would require disaster recovery.
I think sometimes people think of these platforms almost like utilities, like they could never go down. There's nothing. That's not the thing I need to plan for. What I need to plan for is customer mistakes.
If anybody has ever used a utility, but they usually do go.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
You know, my water is getting shut off a couple days a week because they're redoing the water mains.
And electricity goes out, phone goes out.
Electricity goes out, phone goes out.
Yeah, it's very true.
Natural gas is I guess they had to come and change my meter one day, so I had no gas for a day.
There you go.
So, you know, utilities go down too, and you have to be ready for that, right?
Yeah.
That's why data centers have backup generators and stuff.
Right.
And that's why you should definitely have an offsite backup that doesn't use the same cloud service, which can be hard now because, you know, a lot of services out there are just reselling one of the existing major ones. But, you know, if you can at least try to be in two places, then and separate the stuff and control the access to your backups. You know, backups are also kind of can be a weak spot in security, right? So people just back them up and don't worry about it. It's like, well, that's a complete copy of all your data. You know, data breaches can happen from backups, right? Because especially backups oftentimes are missing a lot of the access control that you have on the live system.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Because it's just the data is sitting there on tape or whatever, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Well, and it's like one of those things where it's like, boy, in an emergency, you know, we can't have too many things in the way because, well, you know, if it's an urgent situation, we need to be able to get to that data, we need to be able to restore it. And if we have too many protections in place, I mean, there can also even be that kind of pressure. So you really got to watch out. It's a tough thing, Mr. Jude. All right, any other thoughts on that story?
No, I just have the quote I promised earlier.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Code spaces will not be able to operate beyond this point.
Oh.
The cost of resolving this issue to date and the expected cost of refunding customers who have been left without the service they paid for will put code spaces in an irreversible position both financially and in terms of ongoing credibility.
Wow.
As such, at this point in time, we have no alternative but to cease trading and concentrate on supporting our affected customers in exporting any remaining data they have left with us. So maybe there was some data left, but you know, if your Subversion repository gets deleted, you're pretty screwed. Like you probably have some checkouts on your local machines or whatever, so you might not have lost all the code, but you might lost some code or just have a hard time reconstructing it because you know everybody's got their local changes that haven't been committed yet or whatever. But the biggest thing is that you lose the history, right, which can be extremely important.
Very true.
And that's why. You know, each of these customers probably should have had their own backup as well, right?
Yeah, and there is that's an interesting aspect to the story. Is what is the customer impact of something like this? What's their story? What's their situation?
Well, yeah, it could. You know, if somehow one of these companies didn't have the checkout, they could have lost their entire application, right? All the code in their repository would be gone, or you know, even if they do have some checkouts or whatever, you know, they've lost all of the code from the point where it got deleted to now, right?
Yeah.
And also just the time, right? People came into work on the day during the attack or whatever, and they couldn't do all the work. And then, you know, so a lot of companies probably had at least a week of work, let alone possibly some work that got done, got deleted and lost and had to be redone.
Yeah. There you go. Boy,
But yeah, so I definitely think code spaces should have had a better backup plan, and each of the customers I don't know if any of them did or didn't, but the customers should have their own backup plan, because you shouldn't rely on the service provider to have the backup plan. Because, if something happens to the service provider, can you trust, if in this case they got compromised, in the event of that, would you trust their backups anyway?
Right. Yeah, it's your data at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Alan, let me tell you about something else that's yours at the end of the day. That's your mobile bill, and I want to help you guys make that a little bit simpler. Go over to techsnap.ting.com and check out Ting. What is Ting? Ting is mobile that makes sense. It's a flat $6 per month, and then they just bill your usage on top of that, plus whatever cut the man's got to take. But they take your minutes, your messages, your megabytes, they add them up at the end of the month, and that's what you pay. So right now, my plan, I've got two phones. I've got the HTC One and the Nexus 5. Now, both Rika and I are very savvy about how we use our phones. We primarily stay on Wi-Fi. Sometimes my bill is barely $30 a month. Now, I'm a big data user, so that'll creep up, but it's great because one month, maybe I use a little more data, and the other month I use a little less data. Instead of paying into some sort of contract where it's, well, I might use X amount, so I always better at least buy that much, and then, of course, they always end up on the benefit end of that deal, and it's never me. I prefer to just pay for what I actually end up needing to use, and it turns out that ends up saving me a ton of money. Plus, Ting has the tools to give you control, like their incredible dashboard. Also, their Android and iOS apps let you set alerts, let you manage your phone, let you decide where a call should go when you don't answer, and let you get a brief and quick snapshot of exactly what your usage is at. Go over to techsnap.ting.com and try out their savings calculator. I went over there and I filled in, I figure this is, from what I've been hearing from folks, a bit average, 600 minutes a month. Again, you fill in how much you actually use, not what you're paying into, because that's the gimmick part. Fill out what you actually use, 600 minutes, 300 text messages. Think about that. Do you actually send 300 text messages? Probably not. Maybe you get some alerts from like a monitoring service. Let's make that 200.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's say 200 text. How many text messages do you get a month, Alan, do you think?
Not that many, because I've turned my my notification system only escalates to my cell phone.
Right.
So, only if I don't get the email.
How many minutes do you think you use?
Minutes? Like 75?
75
maybe?
minutes? So that's about how much I use too, actually, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, most of my phone calls are under 5 minutes, and I don't make a phone call every day.
And I'm a little higher on the data usage, so I'm going to just say, do you know what your data usage is? Probably
not much. 200 megabytes.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say, all right, let's split the difference between you and I. I'll say 700 megabytes for data usage. Now, my bill was, now I've been on Ting for a long time now, but my bill was about $130, $125. I'm going to put that in there. We'll say calculate savings. Just to get an idea of what we would save if we were to switch over the Ting network over a 2-year period, $2,208. That's a new laptop every 2 years by switching to Ting, right? That's a new toy in your pocket almost every single month if you want to go that route. That's savings right there. Go over to techsnap.ting.com. That'll take $25 off your first Ting device. If you've got a Ting-compatible device and they got a great BYOD page, they'll give you a $25 credit. And don't forget, Ting has no-hold customer service. You call them at 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., and a real Canadian answers the phone. They're able to solve your problem. They've also got a fantastic online self-help at help.ting.com, and they got a great blog that gives you insights into what the company's up to, what the company has upcoming, what the company's up, what the company has upcoming, all those kinds of things. It's nice to kind of just give you insights into what they're up to, what's coming down the pipe, what new features, what new phones.
Transparent company.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it's all $6 a month. That's all you pay. And then it's just your usage on top of that. TechSNAP.ting.com. And a huge thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. I've been using them for well over a year, and they absolutely rock.
Well, the day they get to Canada, I'll be using them.
Oh, you bet. You know they want it too, Alan. So we've seen some examples over the years of big data releases, and they claim it's anonymous data, and then you're able to, of course, narrow it down to folks. And I guess we've seen another example of that with taxis in New York. What's going on here, Alan?
Yeah, so there was under this FOIL Act, the Freedom of Information Law in New York State or something, somebody was able to request from the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission the anonymized GPS logs for all taxi trips. So they get the logs of where the cars were, and also the logs the pickup and drop off point, and the fare logs for how much money people spent and so on. and the data was anonymized. So yeah, Chris Wong managed to get the data. Basically, he submitted the request, and they're like, if you bring an external hard drive that holds at least 200 gigabytes, and it has to be new, sealed in the box, never been opened, for security reasons, because they don't want to just plug in random people's external storage devices into their computers. Although, how hard is it to infect an external hard drive with a virus and then put it in the box and seal it again?
Right.
Doesn't seem like that strong a protection. But
just ask the NSA.
Right, but this definitely solved people just the external hard drive they already have, and they've got a virus or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So it's not a completely unsensible security precaution, although it seems like they should have a Linux or BSD machine they use to copy the data onto the hostile drives rather than the Windows machine. But anyway, so he went down to the office and dropped off the hard drive and came back the next day and picked it up, and he had 173 million trip records now. And he posted these online so that it's easier to get them, since, the current process of buy a brand new external hard drive and bring it to our office and then come back later and pick it up. And
cumbersome.
So on. It's cumbersome, yeah. So he did a bunch of analysis with it, and some people made these cool visualizations with it, where you can see, the little yellow dots moving around on a map, showing how stuff was happening.
Wow.
But when he was done with his job with the data, he posted it online so people could see it. And then a developer, Vijay Panduranigan, took a look at the data and noticed that the medallion and hack numbers appeared to be MD5 hashes, right? Because they were exactly this long and they were just hexadecimal, right? And so he's like, that's interesting. That makes sense of a way to anonymize the data because it's an unreversible hash, right? But then they noticed things like there was this one driver who had more trips than humanly possible. Like, he can't be in two different places at once. So how does this happen? And he was like, I recognize that MD5 hash from something else. What is that? Turns out it's the MD5 hash of the number 0. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. When they didn't know which driver it was in the trip data or whatever, it's just 0. And so when they hashed it, that's what it came out to. He's like, well, does that mean that the hash is just the driver number and nothing else? So he tried it. He knew that the driver hack license numbers are between 5 and 7 characters. So there's 5, 6, and 7 character versions, and all of them have a pattern where it's like, number, letter, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so based on that, he knew what the possible inputs were. Every possible taxi medallion number would fall in this range. And turns out that was about 24 million MD5, 24 million combinations that we had to MD5.
Okay.
Well, if you remember back to when we talked about doing brute forcing MD5 hashes, when I think it was Gawker or somebody had theirs, or LinkedIn was SHA1, which is slightly different but same idea. Well, brute forcing 24 million combinations of MD5 takes about 2 minutes on a CPU.
Okay.
So he did that. And so now he had every possible hack number and what the corresponding MD5 hash would be. And then by cross-referencing that with the MD5 hashes in the data, he was able to replace the MD5 hash with the original hack number. And so once he did that to the medallion number and the hack number, he now de-anonymized all the data. And if you use other websites on the internet, you can, there's a service, I think, from the Taxi Commission where you can look up a certain hack number and find out the driver's name. And
Taxi
so now,
facts.
so now they can de-anonymize it further.
Yeah.
And so it seems, that at this point the anonymizing wasn't strong enough. And so I have links here to the original guy who got the data, the developer who actually de-anonymized it, and he's got some mention of, I think it was someone on Reddit noticed the pattern of the one guy having too much stuff, and then he figured out that it was the MD5 hash of 0. And there was also conversation at Hacker News and stuff. And then Ars Technica had a good write-up on it. And then I just have some notes on how the anonymizing should have been done to prevent this.
Oh, very good.
Right. So to prevent this, there's a number of different approaches. The fastest and weakest is just using a secret key or a shared secret. So what you do, instead of just doing the MD5 of, say, the hack number, you would do MD5 of some big, long secret key string, and then the hack number. So you just concatenate the two, some password or secret, and then the hack number, and then MD5 it. And then once you've done that, when someone tries to brute force it, they have to know that super long key.
Yeah.
And if it's big enough, then it'll take them too long to try to guess it. But you still get the consistency of, the same input gives you the same output. And it's entirely possible for, if you're the taxi commissioner, you need to de-anonymize the data or something, as long as you still know the secret key, you could, I suppose.
Right, yes, they would, yeah, okay.
But they have the original, so they wouldn't need to do that. So then, if you want to make it impossible to de-anonymize it in this particular way, we'll talk, the other option is to use the MD5 hash of the encrypted form of the value, right? So you do like AES encryption on the hack number with a big strong key. Now, the way AES works is, even with a short value, the output size is going to have to be a multiple of the block number or the block size, right? So even if your input's only this long, the output's going to be this long because it has to be a multiple of the block size.
Alan's showing hand gestures to indicate length, audio listeners.
Sorry. Anyway, so you'd encrypt it and you would get this big block, but because you use an MD5, you'd end up shortening it anyway. So it would come out, everyone would come out the same length and everything.
Right.
And then what you could do is you would throw away that key that you used to encrypt it. So now it's impossible to decrypt it in two different ways, actually, because you did the MD5 of the hash. If you're the attacker, you don't know what the original encrypted form was yet, right? Like, if you just store the encrypted version, which would be a lot longer and not probably binary or text safe to put in a CSV file, then the person could try to brute force it. But when you MD5 that hash, you're deleting most of the data, right? And just having this fingerprint. So then you'd have to know what algorithm and stuff they used, and then you would have to brute force the password and the value, and then you still have to try to brute force it the way you did with the MD5 by guessing the input, because you wouldn't even have the ciphertext to work with. So it'd be harder to break than just regular encryption, because it's designed not to be decrypted ever.
I like this.
But as the article mentions, there are still other ways you could de-anonymize the data, because when you had the MD5 hash or just some unique value that identifies one particular driver, if you were, say, the person that took the cab on two of those dates and you knew you had the same driver or whatever, then you could find your data in the anonymized data, find your trip, and then be like, all right, so my driver was this guy, and then here's all the other trips by that guy. Or, I know this taxi driver works in this area, or, I want to track a certain person who I know takes the same taxi trip once a week, right? And then so you could find their trip every week in the data. So there's still other ways to de-anonymize it, but if you just either throw, very simply, just throw in some fixed piece of data that nobody else knows in with the hash, then it's harder to brute force the hash, or encrypt it first and then hash it. So that way you still get the consistency, right? The same driver still always has the same hash, but you can't reverse that hash back to the hack number that way.
They should hire you, Alan. That's a good idea. Maybe just...
it's just the way you do it. Like
just a consulting fee, maybe.
There's a system like this for doing URLs. It's called Secure Link.
Okay.
It's a way to make it so that only people who are authorized can download a file. And basically what it consists of is the regular URL, and then you throw in this MD5 hash on the end. And it's the MD5 hash of some secret value that the attacker won't know, so that they would have to try to guess, and you make it long enough, it's too hard to guess. Then the file name, so that they can't use the hash for a different file, and the time, and then optionally also the IP address if you want to limit them to the one IP address, right? And then as an extra parameter, you put the time stamp on the end, right? So now so I generate that on my website. And so the only two places that know the password are my website and the web server. And the user doesn't. So then when the web server gets the request, it takes the password it already knows, the file name you're requesting, the timestamp you included in the as the second parameter, and then optionally the user's IP address, and hashes that. And if it comes up to the same hash, it knows you are allowed because this hash was obviously generated with that same password that no one else knows. And if it's not, or if the time is too old, right, you can set expiration date. So you say, don't accept a timestamp that's more than an hour old, then you can refuse it. So it works in the same principle of just the hash of some big secret, and then the known information means that you can verify it on one end, but the anonymous person in the middle can't know what the secret is, or can't regenerate the hash without knowing what the secret is.
It's interesting that we see systems like this put in place where the institution will say, oh, yes, it's anonymized data. Of course, we could...
Well, yeah, they tried, and it made sense. But the main issue why it didn't work in this case is because the hack numbers are so short and so predictable, right? It's not even just, doing every MD5 hash of 7 letters is pretty easy. It's a rainbow table. They're out there. You can download it. But in this case, he didn't even have to do that because he knew it was always going to be like number, letter, or something like that, like license plates, right? There's a known pattern. And so it's really easy. You can cut the key space way down because you know that the second character is always a number or always a letter. So you don't have to try the other combinations.
Very good, sir. Very good.
Or like, if you're doing license plates in Ontario, I think they've only done up to like the letter F for the first character. Right? So, all right, I only have to try A through F on the first character, and then A through Z for the second, third, and fourth character, and then only numbers for the last 3 characters or something like that. And so you cut the key space way down, and you can brute force it faster.
Very good. Very good. Any other thoughts on that, Alan?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, then I'll take a minute, and I'll thank our second sponsor this week, DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com, and let's rock this promo code. As the month of June comes to a close, use the promo code SNAPJUNE to get a $10 credit over at DigitalOcean. Now, what is DigitalOcean? I'll tell you, my friends. It's simple cloud hosting dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Users can create a cloud server in about 55 seconds, and pricing plans start only $5 a month for 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, a blazing fast CPU, and 1 terabyte of transfer. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, and Amsterdam. I think one of my favorite things is their interface, though. It's simple, it's intuitive, their control panel rocks, and power users can replicate it on a larger scale with their straightforward API. And I've often talked about the droplet system, which gives you the ability to make snapshots and backups and replicate systems that are configured the way you want them and deploy them quickly. But I think one of the other things that's perhaps a nice advantage to DigitalOcean is this community they have that's put together a ton of tutorials. And the reason why I want to address this is because sometimes one of the problems you can have, particularly in a Linux environment, is there is a lot of possible dynamics involved in how you set it up. Which distribution did you use? Which version of the distribution did you use? Is the guide you're following appropriate? And things like that. And what DigitalOcean offers you in this space is pretty unique. First of all, you can use the snapshot system to make a backup before you make any big changes. That's okay.
Yep.
But the second thing is not only do they have one push installation for a ton of packages, and the way they're delivering those installations is super smart using containers, but the other thing is they have an incredible community resource of guides that tell you how to set up things like Dovecot mail server, IPv6 on your DigitalOcean droplet. These are all things that are specific to the DigitalOcean environment, but also apply to the distribution. So that when you go in there, you pick your distribution, and anything that you need to know is in this guide. And following this, you'll be in a controlled environment where you'll know exactly what variables to expect. You'll have a guide for people that have deployed this in the same exact setup that you're now deploying it, and it's all right there under one umbrella over at DigitalOcean.com. But use our promo code SNAPJUNE to get a $10 credit. That'll let you try out the $5 rig for 2 months for absolutely free. That'll give you plenty of time to try out their DNS management, their one-click install, create a few droplets, and see how much you can do for $5 a month. DigitalOcean.com, and use the promo code SNAPJUNE, get that $10 credit, and see what I've been talking about. And then, once you got your server, head over to the tutorials section and read through something you want to get set up. You'll be amazed how fast you can get up and running. When you've got it all under one roof, it's all really easy to manage, and you can take snapshots and take baby steps if you're a little concerned. And if nothing else, you can move something like email or GitHub under your own roof where you have control of it for an incredible value. DigitalOcean.com, promo code SNAPJune when you check out. And a huge thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Boom, boom, boom. I got to drop it up there right now. I'm running BitTorrent syncing something from my house. I got a little backup going.
Yep, that's the other thing. It's great for storing backups, and $5 is pretty cheap.
Yeah. All right, Alan, we're going to talk about hackers going after a hedge fund now, aren't we? Whoa.
Yeah, so we don't have that much detail on this story because, they're keeping everything pretty quiet.
Sure.
But when I saw the headline, I was like, we have to cover this on TechSNAP.
It makes a lot of sense to go after a hedge fund if you think about it.
Well, so this particular hedge fund is doing what's called high-frequency trading, right, where they're buying and making and canceling orders at nanosecond intervals for the purpose of making money, basically. That's what a hedge fund is. So they noticed some suspicious things going on. So they brought in BAE Systems, which is a British defense contractor that now also specializes in cybersecurity.
Of course.
They called them in to investigate what was going on. So the attackers somehow infiltrated the high-frequency trading system and were injecting delays of several hundreds of microseconds into the order entry system.
Uh-oh.
So basically, high-frequency trading works on, making and canceling orders really, really fast in those little intervals between when other people are doing stuff in order to make money. And so by inserting a delay, then they wouldn't be able to pull the trigger fast enough, and so they would miss out on the profit. Or, they wouldn't cancel the order in time, and then they would sell it at the bad price instead of the good price, right? And it was they were losing the edge over their competitors and missing out on the profits. It suggested that the attackers were specifically capitalizing on this. They were inserting the delay so they could make the trade and make that profit instead.
Oh. Thrifty Spend in our chat rooms, he surmises that perhaps it was an insider attack, somebody who knew this delay would be going on and then decided to capitalize on it. What do you think, Alan?
Well, no, somebody modified their software to insert the delay. So it could have been an inside job, yes. Yeah. But I don't think it was happening and then someone else capitalized on it.
Oh, right. No, yeah. No, I mean, somebody inside caused it.
Yeah, entirely possible. Or somebody from outside. And, so BAE Systems is speculating it was like organized crime making money here. But it definitely seems like it had to be someone that understood high-frequency trading and stuff, and even someone that was familiar with the way the high-frequency software is built. So it does kind of suggest an inside guy at one of the banks that, one of the guys who's building the high-frequency trading system.
Mm-hmm. They must have known, and they knew how much to tweak it without perhaps alerting somebody immediately, but still costing them. Yeah.
Several hundred microseconds is a long time in high-frequency trading, but it's not a long time when you're trying to measure it.
Right. How do you even log that appropriately?
Exactly. So, and then the chief cybersecurity officer at Trend Micro says hedge funds really have inadequate cybersecurity as a whole, and the attacks threaten to undermine the systems used globally for high-frequency trading. And we've seen things like back, I think it was 2010, there was a run on the market caused by some high-frequency trading gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And you could see that same thing happening here, right? In this case, they were out to make some money, so they didn't break anything. But if you were, say, a state-sponsored hacker, maybe you would purposely, cause a run on the market and, you could destroy a bank or something using this.
Absolutely.
Or the hedge fund, right? You could cause it to go out of business.
That's what I was going to say. You could definitely do that, yeah.
Well, it actually reminds me of a Tom Clancy novel, Debt of Honor. The Japanese purposely crashed the American, like the NASDAQ, I think it was, specifically to cripple the U.S. economy when they were retaking some island they lost in World War II.
Not even that. It just kind of reminds me a little bit of Office Space too. Like, that just to make a small tweak.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this, so, in this case, it was somebody trying to make money, but the same security flaw could be used for someone to do something more malicious, and that would be bad.
Oh, for sure. Well, keep your ear to the ground, Alan. If we find anything more, we can chat about it. But I think it's one of those things where they're not going to share too much because of the money situation involved. Let me tell you about something.
In particular, they won't even tell us which hedge fund it was. Because,
Yeah.
knowing that that hedge fund got hacked would cause people to.
Well, I got something I like to share, something I like to talk about, and that is iXsystems. And you can find more at iXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Go there. Let them know you appreciate them sponsoring the TechSNAP program and learn more about the awesome services that iXsystems rocks. They've got systems powered by the Intel Xeon processors and the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. 11 key traits you just got to demand. Absolutely must demand from your provider. That's great material if you're looking to convince maybe somebody above you that there are other solutions out there than some of those other guys. I think,
and not just that, but better solutions.
Yeah,
everything
I think so.
From when you call them with, here's the problem I'm having and I need to solve. Right? Instead of them trying to sell you one of the servers they already have built, it's like, well, exactly what do you need, and we'll build the machine that works best for that. And that's been a great value to me personally because I usually need something that's not the same as everybody else. Right?
For sure, yeah.
It's like, I need a lot of hard drives, but I need them to be discrete wired, not through a SAS expander, or
right.
I need the smallest, quietest machine you can build, but it has to have at least 4 gigabit network cards.
Yep. Very much so. And they're great at
like
that. And you also have the faith to know that the people behind it aren't just people who are maybe involved in one aspect and then sort of just kind of tuned in. No, these people are fundamentally involved at all aspects, from the open source code level to hardware partnerships to the testing to the customer service and to the community.
They worked with LSI to write the new drivers, and test the new drivers for the 12 gigabit per second SAS controllers.
Wow.
Which are now available in release candidate 9.2.1.6 of FreeNAS.
So if I buy an iXsystems, I'm literally buying from a company where the folks that work there are writing the drivers.
Helping to, anyway.
Yeah,
yes.
That's amazing. And what's cool is...
the people at iXsystems also help write the FreeBSD kernel.
Right. And that's why they're so involved with the community. Yep. They have over on their What's New page a Southeast Linux Fest 2014 recap. Looks like a really good post. They got some pictures. There's Drew talking, doing her thing, and some ZFS stuff there. Alan, I think this was a good event. I kind of bummed that you and I didn't get to go. I saw some interviews we covered in Linux Action Show, Linux Unplugged from the floor, and it's really cool to see folks from iXsystems there. We got a chat with Ken Moore. He works there with Chris at iXsystems, and they work on PCBSD. And this is just an example of another area that iXsystems gets involved at. There's so many things to check out over there. Go over to iXsystems.
And it just so happens that we've actually interviewed 2 people from there almost in a row. So if you check out today, the episode of BSD Now that just came out like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We have an interview. Sorry, no, we haven't used that. Never mind.
That's a future episode next week?
So next week's episode, we'll have an interview with Josh Petzlow, who's the Chief Technology Officer over there.
At iX?
He's the head of... the IT department, which is different. But anyway, he's the director of IT over there.
The guy that really runs the place then.
Yeah, but he gave us a talk about what their plans are for FreeNAS 10, but also a ZFS war story or two. And which also kind of highlights the level of support that iXsystems provides.
Yeah, I remember.
So yeah, it was Memorial Day weekend, and instead of taking the weekend off like everybody else, he rescued a customer. He got in his truck, drove to the iX office, loaded up, I think it was 200 terabytes of storage space in his truck, and then drove 6 hours to the customer in order to rescue their pool and have it up and running again before the holiday ended.
That's awesome. So go over to iXsystems.com/TechSNAP and be sure to check out episode 44 of BSD Now when it comes out next week for that interview. Yep. And a big thanks to iXsystems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
Yeah, and the week after that, we should have an interview with Craig Rodriguez, who's responsible for the testing infrastructure at FreeBSD, and also, which is actually based off the infrastructure he designed for FreeNAS.
Well, and so what did just come out this week is episode 43, package design, that was just posted. So there you go. You guys can go check that out.
We did the interview live this week with the rest of the episode that came out, but we had actually done the interview for that one the week before. And interviews are all over the place.
Yeah, I hear you.
Whenever we can squeeze them in.
So if you need more show, go check out BSD Now. And also, The Jupiter Broadcasting Network is looking to expand, and we could use your support. Please visit patreon.com/today. We're trying to reach some funding so that way we can do things like hire a few more people and make investments in our equipment and replace things that have been failing. And the way we want to do that is by increasing the audience funding, so that way we can keep a good, healthy balance between sponsor funding and audience funding. So go over to patreon.com/today. This is a 1-2 combo. We're incorporating the funding of our network and celebrating it through the Tech Talk Today show, so they kind of work together. So when we reach different milestones, we celebrate in Tech Talk Today. You can go over to patreon.com/today and pledge at different levels to help invest in our network, help us get to the next level, hire some contractors to take care of things like we keep getting emails about the TechSNAP back catalog, like around episode 34, there's some bad links and in a couple other spots. All of the shows have this because we had to switch from Blip TV years ago, and there's lots of the back catalog is very active. Surprisingly, that's one of sort of the big surprises I had. Yeah, it's just like people continue to listen. Like that's old, but people love it, right? But the problem is some of them are missing, and it's an example of some of work that needs to be done, but it's arduous. It takes a long time because the back catalog is so huge for all the shows. Yep. There's a lot of little things that we need to get people on board to help us with tech issues in studio, all this kind of stuff. The network's like gotten to this point where we're at a size where there's a lot of things that we need to do, but we are not financially there because I really try to keep us to about no more than 3 ads per show. So this is why we're trying to raise some audience funding over at patreon.com/today, so you can help us tackle these challenges. So that way, maybe by the time next year rolls around, we're really sitting in a good position at this time. Patreon.com/today. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate your support. Please help the Jupiter Broadcasting Network reach its next level, and you can do that. You can take part of that, and I'm releasing exclusive videos from time to time just for the folks who are patrons over at patreon.com/today. All right, Alan, I think we're all done with the news segment, aren't we?
Nope.
All right, well, I'll let you. So you get up, you'll stretch, that way you're not so sleepy, because look at you over there yawning. And this is just the first episode, man. This is a marathon.
I'm not tired, don't worry.
Okay, all right. All right, good, because the news is over, and that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or clicking that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our brand new subreddit just launched today, links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first email this week comes in from Robert, and he's following up on the Docker story, which, of course, we knew we were going to get feedback on. He says, hey guys, just listening to the last week's episode of TechSNAP. While I type this, I thought I'd make a few comments about Docker. I think there's a couple things that make the Docker flaw a non-issue that we talked about last week, where somebody could break out of the container, and if it was a root application.
I still wouldn't say it was a non-issue. It was a major design flaw in that they were trying to do a blacklist instead of a whitelist on capabilities.
So he goes on to say, number one, and we'll go through this because we had a couple emails like this, and I thought, this is
this
just
one
good
does seem to have points.
Number one, Docker 0.11 was not a production version.
But everybody was using it anyway.
Right. It's only officially production as of 1.0. And I will note, it's one of those things where the Docker...
But it basically wasn't fixed until 1.0, and 1.0 is like 2 weeks old. Like, we've been hearing about Docker and people raving about it for so long.
Yes.
Just because it still says beta on it doesn't mean that people...
They use it. They do end up using it.
It wasn't that people were using a non-production ready version of it. It is Docker was marketing a non-production ready version of it.
I was reflecting back. I've interviewed the Docker project folks on 3 separate occasions, and on 2 of those interviews, they did very much stress they didn't want people using it in production in 2 of the 3 interviews.
Okay.
So, it's one of those things where, like, obviously people have been looking for...
It seemed the developers didn't want anybody to use it, but the marketing people were going.
Well, I think that might be part of it. I think that might be part of it.
Conferences and trying to drive all this buzz about it.
There's a thing called DockerCon before it was even at 1.0.
Yeah.
So,
a developer summit type thing makes sense, but it definitely seems that they were really trying to create the buzz and get the product going before it was actually launched.
So I'm
not necessarily wrong. I'm just saying that it's kind of hard to hide behind the defense of it's not production ready.
Yeah.
When,
he wanted to point. I'm going to jump ahead a couple of points, but I'll leave the rest of his points in the because they're all kind of those next few points all kind of go together. But he says you raised the point that containers would not be upgraded and would be frozen at an old version of the container. This is not actually as bad as it sounds. Unlike the out-of-date VM where you have many out-of-date processes running, a container will only be running the app processes. So the only active processes are that of the application. Okay.
Well,
but if it relies on the library,
if it's a web application, then you have your web servers out of date, and what doesn't matter if it's running in the container or not if it's out of date.
Yeah.
Right. And again, his example with the MariaDB, if your MariaDB is linked against a bad version of OpenSSL, then people can heartbleed your database server.
Right. And I think that was more in response to my comment about how it would be hard to keep the user land up to date. But he kind of points out that.
Right, but it's anything not being updated is a problem, and just being like, oh, it's only the one app that's not being updated. It's like that's still a problem.
Aleska, who is a developer on the Docker project, writes in and says, first of all, I'd like to say I love the show. I've watched the whole backlog as well as Last Coder Radio, Unplugged, and all the others. Wow, Aleska Pro. This email is sent in regards to your comments that the Docker containers aren't yet ready to be used like FreeBSD jails. The only reason for this, as of version 1.0.1, Docker still doesn't support user namespaces, which means that the root user is in the container is the same as the user on the host system. The developers, including me, are working hard on getting support for this into Docker. We really wanted it before 1.0, but we fell into dispute over what the API should look like, which is typical for the developers, I know. Anyway, the point is that Docker will work like FreeBSD jails once we get user space namespaces. Until that point, Docker is still in the works in terms of security features. In all fairness, I also agree that 1.0 was rushed. Several security and other features didn't make the cut. If 1.0 had been delayed 6 months or so, Docker may have been good enough for production. As it stands now, I'm personally going to wait for several patches to be merged, things like secrets, user namespaces, race condition fixes, and the like, before using Docker in some projects I'm working on. Cheers. Keep up the great work. Cypher.
Yeah, see, that makes more sense. The other thing I was going to mention is I don't know if they have it yet, but they would need mount point namespaces as well, right? So that you can't access, if you know the inode number, you can't open a file out of the root file system.
Right, yep. I think that was a great email, Cypher. Thank you very much for chiming in and giving us
and so it goes on to show that exactly what we were saying a minute ago is that there's this fight between the developers that are actually trying to do a good job and the company behind it who's trying to sell the product. And claiming, the developers say that 1.0 is not production ready, but the company says otherwise. And that we saw the same thing with the 0.11 and so on, right? And this is it goes back to the point I was making the other day. It just seems weird to see the Linux community jumping behind this so hard when they're usually so anti-corporate. And Docker is obviously such a startup culture thing rather than a.
And I think
rather than the typical open source project.
Right. I think they also ran into. It seems to me that like the Linux server space really, 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 really wanted this product, and a company like Red Hat really wanted to be able to say Red Hat 7 includes Docker 1.0. And
right, yes.
A couple of months ago,
and at the same time, the developer says it'll take 6 months, and 6 months later, it's like, yeah, we need another 3 months because there's these other things we've thought up that we want to have in 1.0, and it'll never produce.
What's interesting in retrospect is about 3 months ago in LAS, I covered a story about Red Hat and Docker creating up a partnership and working together. And Docker was still, like, at that point in time when that story hit, Docker was still publicly saying, we don't know when 1.0 is. We're not sure if it's even going to land this year. That's what Docker was saying. Then that agreement gets made. 3 months later, Red Hat 7's released, Docker 1.0's out. You got to figure...
Right. There was some pressure there, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yes, so... Even the Docker developers say it's not ready to be FreeBSD jails. And I'm not sure what the networking is like inside, and I don't know that it will quite have feature parity with FreeBSD jails, but it definitely will get closer as they keep working on it.
If you have a lot of Linux infrastructure, if you're staying in that space, I think Docker's definitely at that position right now where
it's
should
better than nothing.
Well, and you could be experimenting with it, right? You could be running it in your lab. You could be running it on your personal machine, testing it. I don't know if I'd put it on production
just
still.
The containerization, to have a package be installed over here and not over here and stuff, it definitely is useful. Or even just conflicting packages. On our web server, we have one jail that has PHP 5.3 and one that has 5.5. Makes it much easier to test the same app and flip back and forth and stuff.
Right. I was thinking about here, potentially at the JB Studios, we run Arch on our servers, but the mail package I was looking at wants to be in an Ubuntu environment. And again, I don't really want to run a whole Ubuntu server, but I might be willing to run a Docker container. I don't know if I'm going to wait a couple of months.
Is there that big of a difference between Arch and Ubuntu where you can't run a certain mail server?
No, it's just for support. It's just, it's all that. Yeah. I figure because what they do is they have an installation package and all that kind of stuff. It targets Ubuntu. So when I'm getting support, it's an Ubuntu environment. Sure.
What mail server is that?
A very fancy Exchange replacement.
Okay.
But I don't know if we're going to. If I do it, I'll make a show.
And for stuff like that, you almost want it the appliance style instead, right?
Yeah. Well, for sure, yeah.
And then it's just a VM.
So Thomas writes in with an interesting Mir SSD with a spinning hard drive question. He says, I'm about to upgrade my main rig, and as such, I've ordered 4 Intel 530 240 gigabyte SSD drives. I'll be getting all of those, and I'll set them up in a RAID 0. No wiggle room on that unless the performance just won't be there for some odd reason. That sets me up for the obvious scenario of a dead RAID array sooner or hopefully later. Is there a way to mirror a hard drive to the SSD array that will just sync up as fast as it can without ever slowing down the speed of the RAID array? The only reason I would like this is that so I won't have to do a complete backup of the system when a drive dies, and I can just replace it with a new one without having to install all over. Just boot and rebuild. Is there a way to do it in that I'll just have to go for backing up the data of any value to me and reinstall the system when a drive dies in the array? I'm also fine with more, just maybe I can't do it, but he wanted to see what we thought.
Yeah, now this is something everybody wants. I actually asked the author of ZFS about it. I was like, hey, my laptop has an SSD and a hard drive, and it'd be great if the hard drive could just, be an asynchronous replica, right? It would have all the data, but not quite.
Very much, yeah.
So I think what he's talking about here is he's going to stripe his 4 SSDs to make basically a 1 terabyte drive, and he wants to have a 1 terabyte hard drive just mirror that asynchronously, meaning that when he writes something to the SSDs, it doesn't wait for the hard drive to be finished before it lets you do the next thing. The problem with that is if you have these 4 SSDs and the second one dies, but the hard drive is 500 megabytes behind in keeping up with what was being written or whatever, then you can't really restore that because the other drives will be too far ahead, right? They'll contain writes that you didn't have mirrored to the hard drive. And so the only way to do that in a ZFS type thing is just use ZFS send, and your hard drive, you'd have to basically be completely outside the regular system, and you'd have to accept being like 10 minutes behind or something.
That's fine, I would think.
Yeah. And then basically when enough drives died on the SSD array, where on mine that's 1 drive, on yours it's 4, but you have no redundancy. And when one of them died, you would lose all the data, and you would replace the 1 SSD and then send back from your hard drive mirror to the SSDs. But yeah, in general, there's not, because you want to have that transactional consistency, right, where all the drives are matched up on a certain point in time. And the only way to maintain that is to make sure you don't finish this write until every drive is done. And so once you do asynchronous, then you lose that.
I like the ZFS send idea.
Yeah.
Could you cron that? You could just cron that.
Yeah, exactly. You take a snapshot and then you have continuous replication going.
Yeah.
You can't quite get it down to... It'd be great if there was just a way to say, just keep sending every write. Right?
Yeah.
But...
Yeah.
You can't quite do that.
There's one other program. I mentioned it in last about 3 weeks ago. It's something I've been meaning to take a look at. It's called SnapRAID. It's a backup program for disk arrays. It essentially creates a snapshot and saves that as an image file somewhere and then does diffs on that. And I haven't tried it myself, but the whole idea is that it's sort of file system agnostic, which could be a bad thing actually, but it's something to look at because the idea is you point at an array, you take a snapshot of it, it hashes it, it stores it, then it can go back and check for like any inconsistencies in the data. So if you just want to use it to check the consistency of your data, or if you want to restore from a total failure, it can do that too. So it's called SnapRAID, snapraid.sourceforge.net. I'll have a link in the show notes. That's something else to look at too. I haven't tried it yet myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I had somebody write in that told me to just save their ass. So I thought, well, all right, I'll give it a look. So it's on my list of like maybe a good way to back up systems that have a RAID 0. Because here, for editing purposes, we're really often stuck in a position where we need a lot of storage, minimum a terabyte, but often more than that. But we need it really, really fast. So SSDs aren't awesome because we're dealing with really large files and we're working with them, where they just can grow and grow and grow, and we don't know exactly how big each one's going to be. So spinning media is much more preferable because we can get several like 500 gig or 320 gigabyte 10,000 RPM drives and stack them. But we always end up putting them in a RAID 0, and it's, at any time one of them could pop and we'd be screwed.
Yeah, with ZFS, when you're dealing with the video, you actually have a lot of advantages because you're doing big chunks rather than a lot of random reads like with the database. And like my home array of 6 3 terabyte drives can, sequentially reading video files can easily outperform 750 megabytes per second, which is, what you would get from a bunch of 10,000 RPM drives with smaller block sizes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so with that and a good chunk of ARC, you can actually do some pretty amazing stuff with regular desktop hard drives.
That's nice. You hear that, Apple?
But once you try to do standard or random reads, then, you're suffering from the fact that you have 7,200 RPM hard drives.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got some more emails, but we're going to save them because we're recording a second TechSNAP in just a few minutes. So if you didn't get your email read on this episode, make sure you tune in next week. But we will need your emails. So please go over to Jupiter Broadcasting, click that contact link, choose TechSNAP from the dropdown, and send in your questions at the TechSNAP program. So that way when we're back, we got a whole nother batch because we actually will be recording an episode next week too. So we do need all
it's actually
feedback.
2 weeks away from now that I'm gone to Cambridge University for a week.
Don't leave us hanging, man. Go over to Jupiter Broadcasting and send in your questions to the TechSNAP program. And Alan, with the emails all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't quite fit in the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them. Maybe give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And some of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Our first story this week is a little U.S.-centric. In fact, it's even state-centric. Massachusetts, you've heard of that state before, Alan. Their Supreme Court ordered a suspect to decrypt his computers and his cell phone in a 5-2 decision on Wednesday. The court ruled that a criminal suspect can be ordered to decrypt a seized computer by police. So, long story short, make sure you use some sort of encryption where you have plausible deniability, right, Alan?
Yep, or if you use something like the GBDE where you can do the data has been destroyed. You entered the right password, but the data has been destroyed.
Right.
But yeah, obviously questions raised here about the suspect's right to not incriminate themselves.
Yeah, like his Fifth Amendment protections. Yes, very much so. And they're going after him for mortgage fraud too. So apparently, mortgage fraud is enough to justify forcing somebody to decrypt their. So it's not even like it's some big conspiracy
Well, mortgage fraud seems like it might be.
Well, it could be, but I mean, it's not like it's terrorism. I guess is what I'm saying. They're not terrorism, but it is mortgage fraud terrorism. All right, Alan. Next story in the roundup: a mock email scam gets hundreds of bureaucrats at Justice Canada. What happened, Alan?
Yeah, so the Justice Department of Canada did, you remember we talked about there was that company that did those like internal phishing scams where your IT department phishes your employees and when they click the link, they get schooled on how they shouldn't do that.
Right.
So the IT department at Justice Canada did that. And in the first run they did in December, 37% of the employees fell for the phishing scam.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it's that low. Well, I guess it's almost 40. Yeah, it's almost 40%.
Yeah. Then they ran the test again in April, and about half as many people did it.
Oh.
Because of the awareness campaign and the additional training they had done. And they're planning to do an even more sophisticated one, so one that's harder to tell that it's a phishing, in July, and we'll see what the results are.
Well, maybe they learned their lesson a little bit.
It definitely seems that the percentage of people that fell for it at the Justice Department was actually higher than the average in the public. So apparently a bunch of lawyers are worse at telling a scam from a real thing than regular people.
Well, Eugene Spafford, I don't know if that rings a bell, Spafford, a noted conspiracy expert and professor of computer science at Purdue University, said that the industry in a whole is failing miserably at fixing underlying dangers. Not too surprising here, I suppose, Alan?
Yeah, specifically, applications are written usually poorly, missing security features, and then security features are bolted on after. And, that leads to the underlying problem of the fact that it wasn't built to do that.
Right.
And, or we end up in this, race to patch stuff all the time when a lot of these problems should have been sorted out before the program was released, right? But the bigger case is the case of things where, especially when it's not going to get patches, embedded stuff.
Like routers and whatnot that we've talked about, or SCADA control systems.
Yep.
All right, Alan, here's a tweet. It's just really simple advice. Hey, new passwords cannot consist of B, C, D, G, I, L, O, Q, S, U, V, Z, 1, 2, 5, or 8. What's going on here?
This is a password complexity requirements for the Huawei brand of routers.
Oh, okay.
Which is a Chinese router
Huawei,
brand that's trying to
right?
compete. Yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. But it's competing with Cisco.
Right.
And when you're setting your password on the system, the rules are the password should not be less than 8 characters. New password must consist of at least 2 types of characters, right? Capital letters, small letters, numbers, and special characters. And you can't use the letters B, C, D, G, etc. And your password cannot start with a 0.
Okay.
And it cannot contain any of the same value twice. So you can't do 00 or 11 or 99.
This sounds really frustrating, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah. And the password can't start with 0. Suggests that they're storing it in a database or something where the leading 0 might get pruned off or something.
Maybe.
And that they're not hashing it. And why can't you have the letter C in your password?
Or G, or O, or Q, or S.
I don't know. I don't know if that's dynamic. Maybe it's you can't use letters that were used in your last password, but it doesn't make any sense.
No. Chat room says, by the way, it is pronounced Huawei. Huawei.
Sure.
Hey, that's the chat room, man.
Pronounced that Chinese router company.
The Chinese router company that we claimed was spying on us, and then we found out that we were spying on them, too. What's this? We got a Krebs on Security post in the roundup. An oil company won $350,000 in a settlement? Yeah,
so this oil company had their bank account compromised, and the hackers made off with about $3.5 million. And they reported it to the bank, and the bank, because they did it quick enough, the bank was able to claw most of the money back before the hackers were able to actually withdraw it from the destination bank. But there was about $299,000 they couldn't get back. And so the company sued the bank for the remaining money, and they won $350,000. So I'm guessing the 300 plus some interest. And basically their claim was that the bank didn't provide enough security features. All they had was username and password. They didn't offer tokens or two-factor authentication of any kind.
So they were able to get them on that,
it seems like it was like a smaller bank, I think, and they didn't have fraud detection or something. It's like they managed to just send a huge number of wires in a short period of time. Like when someone wires out $3.5 million in $300,000 chunks really quickly,
maybe put some limiting on that.
Set off a fraud alert.
Yeah, maybe a little alert would be good there.
Yeah, but we've seen it before talk about banks that have 2-person rules. If you want to wire a lot of money, you need a second person to authorize it, and stuff like that. And we've talked about really sophisticated viruses that were trying to trick people into answering those questions during regular transactions, so that the attacker would have the answers when they tried to do it, and stuff like that. But in this case, this bank apparently didn't offer any of those features. And
I just find it, and meanwhile, my bank, I can't order 20 shirts for Swag Club members without them shutting down the transaction.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense?
Exactly.
All right.
Nobody likes to see an oil company win a lawsuit, but in this case,
I guess
everybody likes to see the bank lose a lawsuit.
That's true. That's pretty much the order of things. All right, Cisco, maybe in an attempt to sort of change things around reputation-wise, is releasing some open source code, aren't they?
Yeah, so they released the open source for the FNR cipher, which is designed to quickly and safely encrypt IP addresses to anonymize them.
Okay.
So when you're anonymizing log data, instead of using the MD5 hash of an IP address, which would obviously be reversible because, there's only 4 billion IP addresses and it wouldn't take very long because, they're in a certain format, right? 255 to 258, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a cipher designed to encrypt IP addresses. It has the same kind of properties of the output's always going to be the same size. It's much shorter than an MD5, and apparently it should be harder to reverse. And this is mostly designed for anonymizing log data so that you can, say, all right, these requests all came from the same IP address, but you can't tell what that IP address was.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, it could be pretty interesting. And you can see why that's not really a Cisco trade secret where they wouldn't want it. They'd rather have it open source and get it used everywhere.
Sure, absolutely. Don't adjust your set, folks. This is not a rerun. The World Cup security team accidentally shares their awful Wi-Fi password. What I love about this is this was the same exact way they gave out the Wi-Fi password to the Super Bowl. They have one of the...
It looks like the exact same setup.
I know. The officials posing in front of the screen, and they have a document up on the screen with the Wi-Fi password.
And invariably, that document is usually just...
like Notepad.
It's Notepad with the font size cracked way up.
And the password was B5A2112014. So B5A2122014.
Yeah, 112014.
Yeah, 112014. Right there on the screen.
That's not a horrible password. It's not great either.
Yeah. You would think after this happened with the Super Bowl.
That's actually supposed to say Brazil in leet speak.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how clever they are.
Is really an R, but...
And the problem is if they're trying to do leet speak, then maybe people might figure that out a little more readily.
Right. It's obviously not a very good password. It contains way too many numbers. Like, there's only 2 letters, and they're A and B.
Yeah. Dopes. Remember the Super Bowl one was equally as bad.
Yes, but that A should be capitalized, and, they would have been better off keeping the I and the L instead of using 1-1.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It really looks like this password is designed to be easy to type on your cell phone.
Oh my gosh. Chat room was reminding us this also happened with the Winter Olympics. Their Wi-Fi password was up on a TV screen during an interview. The same thing. So this is the 3rd event in a row.
Yep. Do you know what we do at the BSD conferences? It's on the inside of your name tag. The tag you wear. It was like that at Linux Fest Northwest as well, right?
Yeah.
You had the thing around your neck and it had the schedule in it. And on one of the pages was the Wi-Fi password. It's like, these people generally have badges to be able to get in this area. Why can't that have a Wi-Fi?
And the security at these events is supposed to be top notch. Like these are supposed to be
Again, we don't know if the...
right.
If that Wi-Fi gave you access to something you shouldn't have, but it was on all these screens with other stuff they're displaying, and it seems like you'd at least get video you're not supposed to have.
Yeah, and access to at least the network they're operating on, which is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. And then I love the other one. It's like internal requests for something go to this URL at something.gov.br.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We'll have a link to that in the show notes if you guys want to check out the picture. Yo, Alan.
I see somebody in the comments actually posted the Super Bowl version.
Our next story, Yo, founder apologizes for a hack and hires one of the hackers. Hey, there you go. Well, guy's got some money from this stupid app, so might as well, right?
And just one second, on the previous story, they found the Euro 2012 soccer game had the same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What the heck? Oh my gosh. People figure out your Wi-Fi password. Seriously, it's not that hard.
Yep. Mine is there is no such thing as secure wireless.
Oh yeah, there's look at that. That's awesome.
But yes, anyway, the Yo app. So Yo is this silly cell phone app, and basically it's a messaging service where the length of your message is 0.
Right.
All you can do is say Yo.
Yo.
So you send a message to someone and it makes their phone pop up saying that you said Yo.
Yeah. Yeah. We.
It seems it's just like, I suppose, to get somebody's attention or something. I don't actually understand what it's for.
We covered it on Faux Show 182. Just kind of talked about like how kind of ridiculous it is and all that kind of stuff. And Angela's been getting yo'd nonstop since then.
I can imagine.
She's getting all kinds of yo's. So the guy got hacked though, and then he hires the hacker. That's not a bad way to go. Yeah.
So 3 students from Georgia Tech managed to compromise it and be able to send yo's to all kinds of people and to compromise the database. Luckily, the database for Yo doesn't really contain anything because The Yo is designed to be super simple and not take any of your information.
Yo.
So Yo doesn't know, I don't even think it knows your real name, just your username. So there's like a username and a password, and that's it.
Right.
It wasn't clear if the passwords were hashed properly or not. Although the one downside was if you use the Find a Friend feature, it might have a list of the phone numbers of all your friends. So your phone number probably wouldn't leak, but all your friends would. Or rather, your phone number might be in there if somebody you know used Yo.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to shift gears to LastPass and the truth about your password security from its CEO?
Sure. Yeah. So this is an article over at Make Use Of where they just have a nice long interview with Joe Siegerst, who's the CEO over at LastPass. And, he talks about, there was that eBay compromise. And, if you were using LastPass properly, then your eBay password should be different than your PayPal password and every other password.
Spotify.
Generally on eBay, your login is an email address, isn't it? Or is it a username? I forget.
No, it's email.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think mine's a username. Anyway, especially on services where your username is your email address, people often tend to have the same password for that email address. So if you got this eBay list of accounts, it's basically email addresses and passwords. So the first thing you do is try that password at that email address. And look, now I've compromised their email account. I can go and reset their Facebook password, their Twitter password, and boom, I have everything. Even if they did manage to use separate passwords for each service, if I have their email address, or if I've compromised their email account, then I have everything.
Very much.
Right?
Yes.
It was just an interesting read and just promoting people to actually use LastPass.
Always good to remind the folks they need to get out there. And plus, it's good to see
I'm actually using LastPass now.
Really?
Yes. When I built the new computer, I'm like, I'm not going to manage the old system. I'm going to use LastPass properly.
How's it going so far?
Good.
Good. There you go. Good enough for Alan. It's good enough for everybody else.
It took a little getting used to, but
yeah, it still does.
The only thing it's horrible at is it assumes everything like scaleengine.net has the same password.
Yes.
And I have, scaleengine.net, we have a wildcard SSL, so everything is something.scaleengine.net.
Yeah.
And they all have different passwords.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to understand that.
Yeah.
Sure, most web, my password for everything.google.com is the same, but for scaleengine.net, everything's different.
Yeah, I have the same problem for things like that, but it's manageable. So,
yes, it is.
Yeah. And they also have a keyboard for Android, so when you're logging into sites and apps on Android now, you can have LastPass autofill there as well, which is really nice because one of the downsides to having really complicated passwords is it's a real pain in the butt to enter them on mobile devices. So LastPass on mobile takes care of that. All right, Alan. Well, boom. I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode 168, coming to a wrap. We'd love to hear your feedback, so go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and send it into the TechSNAP program after you click on that contact link. And, of course, join us live, won't you, over at jblive.tv. TechSNAP usually kicks off at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom. You can also join us at jblive.info, which has audio-only stream links, which is great for mobile. We've got a low bit rate if you're in the car. We've also got a higher bit rate if you're at a desk, but you still want to conserve bandwidth. Maybe you can't do video, something like that. Or maybe you're just a theater of the mind kind of person. jblive.info has got everything you need. And don't forget, we also have that subreddit, links.techsnap.tv. Go put your thoughts in there, your feedback, your comments. Help us get an idea of the types of topics you're interested in. techsnap.reddit.com or links.techsnap.tv. They both, pro tip, go to the same place. Who knew, right? We also have RSS feeds. Alan, that's because you set it up. That's why you
didn't.
Oh, actually. You didn't set up links.techsnap.tv? Yeah,
that
I think
probably.
you did.
The other part I didn't.
No.
I didn't create the subreddit.
No, yeah, right. And last but not least, just want to mention the RSS feed, so you can just subscribe and get TechSNAP every single week. We also have BitTorrent RSS, so if you got a BitTorrent client that supports RSS, you could get it that way, and we'll help defer a little of the bandwidth cost for us. Okay, we'll leave it right there. Thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.